It started on an ordinary Tuesday night. I was sitting with my 8-year-old daughter, Emily, at our favorite small-town diner. We were halfway through a plate of fries when I noticed her. A woman in a wheelchair, thin, pale, and clearly exhausted, rolled up to the counter. She didn't order anything. Instead, she quietly asked the waitress, "Do you have any leftovers?" Anything people didn't finish. The room went silent for a moment, and my chest tightened. I could see Emily looking at me with those wide eyes, the kind that ask questions without saying a word. The waitress, embarrassed, packed her a small bag of scraps. The woman thanked her softly, her voice trembling, and left as quietly as she came. Something inside me wouldn't let it go. Emily tugged my sleeve. "Daddy, why did she ask for leftovers? Doesn't she have food?" I didn't have an answer, but I couldn't just sit there. I told Emily to finish her fries while I paid the bill. And then, without really planning it, I walked out the door and followed the woman in the wheelchair. She wasn't fast. The chair squeaked with every turn of its wheels. She rolled down cracked sidewalks, past dark alleys, and toward the edge of town. At one point, she stopped to catch her breath, her thin hands gripping the wheels so tightly her knuckles went white. It wasn't pity that made me follow. It was something else. Curiosity, maybe. Or the nagging feeling that this woman carried a story heavier than her fragile body could bear. She turned down a narrow path I'd never noticed before. At the end stood an old, abandoned church, its windows broken, the cross rusted with age. She pushed her chair inside. I waited a moment, then carefully followed. What I saw inside nearly made me stumble. The pews were gone, replaced with makeshift beds made from blankets, boxes, and scraps of wood. And scattered across the floor, half a dozen children, all asleep, curled up together for warmth. The woman in the wheelchair set the bag of diner scraps on the floor. Her hands shook as she unwrapped the food, dividing it carefully, piece by piece, making sure each child would have something. She didn't take a single bite for herself. I stepped forward without thinking. "Wait," I whispered. She gasped, startled, and wheeled back defensively. But then she saw Emily at my side. My little girl had followed me after all. The woman's shoulders slumped. Tears welled in her eyes. "These kids, they don't have anyone. Their parents left, or—" She paused, swallowing hard. "Or worse. I couldn't just leave them. So I take care of them, however I can." "But you don't even have enough for yourself," I said. She smiled faintly, though her lips trembled. "A full stomach means nothing to me if they go hungry." Her voice cracked, and for a moment I thought she might break. But she didn't. She stayed strong for them. I felt Emily squeeze my hand. She whispered, "Daddy, we have to help her." And she was right. That night, I drove home, grabbed every can of food from our pantry, blankets, even Emily's old toys. When we returned, the woman's eyes filled with tears again. But this time, they weren't tears of exhaustion. They were tears of hope. Day after day, we kept coming back. I made calls, reached out to local shelters, even used my work contacts to get the children placed into proper care. But I also made sure none of them were separated from a woman who had saved them, because she wasn't just a caretaker. She was their family. Weeks later, when everything had started to stabilize, I sat with her outside the church ruins. "You've done more for those kids than anyone could imagine," I said. She looked at me, her eyes calm but steady. "I was one of them once. Abandoned. Forgotten. I promised myself if I ever survived, I'd never let another child go through it alone." That was her secret. Her pain had become her purpose. Her suffering had shaped her into a quiet, unshakable force of love. Today, she still cares for those kids, but now she doesn't do it alone. Emily and I visit often. The kids call her Mama Grace, and the name couldn't be more fitting. And every time I see her, I'm reminded of the night I almost ignored a stranger asking for leftovers. A night that could have been just another Tuesday. But instead, it became the night I learned what true strength looks like. Not in power, not in wealth, but in the quiet, unstoppable love of a woman in a wheelchair who chose to carry others, even when she had nothing herself. Life didn't go back to normal after that night. It became something better. Emily and I began visiting Mama Grace and the children every evening after school and work. Some days we brought groceries. Other days we simply brought time, stories, and laughter. Slowly, the old abandoned church started to change. The broken windows were boarded up, blankets became proper bedding, and the faint scent of despair that once clung to the air was replaced by the smell of warm meals and children's laughter. It was no longer just a shelter. It was becoming a home. Of course, it wasn't easy. There were days when donations ran low, when Mama Grace's health faltered, when officials questioned whether the children belonged with her. I watched her sit across from stern-faced men in suits, her hands trembling on the wheels of her chair, but her voice never wavering. These kids are my family. I will fight for them until my last breath. She didn't have power or money, but she had something stronger, unshakable conviction. And somehow, people began to listen. What surprised me most was how much it changed Emily. My little girl, who once worried about toys and cartoons, began saving her allowance to buy pencils, books, and crayons for the children. She started helping them with homework, teaching them songs, and even brushing the younger girl's hair before school. One night, as I tucked her into bed, she whispered, "Daddy, Mama Grace is like a superhero but real." I smiled, realizing that my daughter was learning lessons I could never have taught her alone. Word began to spread about the woman in the wheelchair, caring for abandoned children in the old church. First, it was a few curious neighbors dropping off food. Then local businesses offered supplies, teachers volunteered tutoring, and doctors donated checkups. What started as scraps of leftovers grew into a network of kindness. Mama Grace became more than just a caretaker. She became a symbol. The woman once overlooked on the streets now stood at the center of a community, proving that one person's love could ignite a movement. One quiet evening, after the kids had fallen asleep, I sat beside Mama Grace on the church steps. The moonlight softened her face, and for the first time, she looked tired, bone-deep tired. She confessed something she had never told anyone. I wasn't supposed to live past 20. Doctors told me my condition would keep me from working, from even living independently. But I couldn't accept that. If all I had left was time, I was going to spend it giving these children what I never had, hope. That was her second secret. She wasn't just surviving. She was racing against time, determined to leave behind a legacy of love that would outlive her. Months turned into a year. The abandoned church became fully restored, painted bright with murals of trees, stars, and smiling faces the children made themselves. We built a small garden out back, where vegetables grew tall, and sunflowers stretched toward the sky. Emily and the kids would chase each other through the rows, their laughter ringing like bells across the neighborhood. And every time I looked at Mama Grace, I saw the same quiet strength, the kind that doesn't demand attention, but leaves a mark on every life it touches. Sometimes I still think about that first night, the moment I saw a stranger in a wheelchair asking for leftovers. How easy it would have been to look away, to keep eating my fries, to go home and forget her. But I didn't. And because of that choice, my daughter found a mentor, dozens of children found a mother, and I found a new kind of family I never knew I needed. It taught me something I'll carry forever. The smallest act of curiosity, of compassion, can unravel into something far greater than we imagine. What struck me most, as time went on, was how far the ripple spread. At first, it was just us, then the neighbors, then the town. But before long, stories of Mama Grace reached outside our small community. People began writing about her in local newspapers, then regional outlets. Volunteers came from towns I had never even visited, all because they had heard of a woman in a wheelchair who refused to let children starve. It was strange. She never sought attention, never asked for recognition. Yet the world couldn't help but notice her light. One night, I lay awake thinking about Emily. She had changed so much since meeting Mama Grace. She was braver, kinder, and wiser than her years. And I realized something humbling. Grace wasn't just saving the children in that church. She was saving me too. As a single father, I had often feared whether I was enough for my daughter. But through Grace's example, I learned that being enough wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up, loving without conditions, and giving even when you felt you had nothing left. One afternoon, as I was helping fix a broken wheel on her chair, Grace handed me a folded piece of paper. "For when I'm gone," she whispered. I froze, my chest tightening, but she just smiled softly. "Don't worry, not today. But one day, this will matter." I never opened the letter. I couldn't. It sat in my desk drawer untouched, because I wasn't ready for the day when her voice might fall silent. And yet, just knowing it was there reminded me that her story was still being written, through us, through the kids, through every soul she touched. As the seasons passed, the children began to find their own voices. They weren't just surviving anymore, they were dreaming. One wanted to be a doctor, another a teacher, another whispered shyly to Emily that she wanted to be strong like Mama Grace. They began to paint pictures of the future, colorful and bold, taped proudly to the church walls. Every dream felt like a seed planted in soil that had once been barren. And every time I saw their faces, I realized Grace hadn't just saved them from hunger. She had given them permission to imagine a tomorrow. Now, when I walk past that church, restored, glowing alive, I feel a lump in my throat, because I know that long after I'm gone, after Emily grows up, after these children step into the world on their own, the story of Mama Grace will remain. She taught us all that strength isn't measured in steps taken or wealth earned. It's measured in love given, in burdens carried for others, in sacrifices made quietly when no one is watching. And though I can never repay her for what she's done, I can honor her the only way that matters, by carrying her lesson forward, day after day, moment after moment. There are still nights when I sit on my porch, staring at the stars, and I think about what my life would have looked like if I hadn't followed her that evening. Maybe Emily and I would have gone home, eaten dessert, watched television, and moved on. But then I realize, without Mama Grace, there would be a hollow space in my life where purpose should be. Gratitude has a way of reshaping a person, of making even the ordinary feel sacred. Every laugh Emily shares with those kids, every meal we serve together, every story whispered in that once abandoned church feels like a blessing carved out of what could have been despair. 1 year after that first night, the children decided to throw a celebration for Mama Grace. They painted banners, baked a lopsided cake with too much frosting, and wrote little cards in uneven handwriting that said things like, "Thank you for being our mom," and "You saved my life." When they surprised her, I saw something I had never seen before. A tear rolled down her cheek, not from pain, but from joy. She covered her mouth with trembling hands. Her chair surrounded by the children, she once fed scraps to. That day, I understood something deeper. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone who has carried the world on their shoulders is simply to remind them they are loved in return. Later that night, after the children had fallen asleep, I found Grace sitting by the window, staring at the moonlight. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked softly. "Giving so much of yourself, when you've had so little?" She turned to me with eyes that seemed older than her years, eyes that had seen pain, and yet chose kindness anyway. "No," she whispered, "because in giving I found myself. The world tried to take everything from me, my health, my chance at a normal life. But it couldn't take my choice to love. That's the only thing they can't steal." Her words struck me like lightning, and I knew then that her strength wasn't born from what she endured, but from what she chose despite it. Later that night, after the children had fallen asleep, I found Grace sitting by the window, staring at the moonlight. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked softly. "Giving so much of yourself, when you've had so little?" She turned to me with eyes that seemed older than her years, eyes that had seen pain, and yet chose kindness anyway. "No," she whispered, "because in giving I found myself. The world tried to take everything from me, my health, my chance at a normal life. But it couldn't take my choice to love. That's the only thing they can't steal." Her words struck me like lightning, and I knew then that her strength wasn't born from what she endured, but from what she chose despite it. Now, as I stand on the threshold of that once-forgotten church, I see more than just walls and windows. I see a living testament to what love can build out of brokenness. Mama Grace is still there, still caring, still smiling through her pain, but I know one day the world will have to carry on without her. And when that day comes, we will be ready, not to replace her, for no one could, but to continue the story she began, because her legacy isn't confined to a building or a group of children. Her legacy is in every heart she touched, every soul she lifted, every life she reminded that love is enough. And that, I believe, will echo long after we're all gone. Not long ago, Mama Grace called me over as the children played outside. She pressed something into my hand. It was the letter she had once told me to keep for when she was gone. Her smile was faint, her voice steady, but I could see the weight in her eyes. "I think you're ready to read it now," she whispered. That night, when Emily was asleep, I opened it carefully. Inside were words written in her delicate handwriting. "If you're reading this, then remember, love isn't meant to be kept. It's meant to be passed on. Don't mourn me. Carry me. And wherever there is someone in need, give them what you once gave me a chance." I sat there for a long time, the letter trembling in my hands, tears falling freely, realizing that her last gift to us wasn't her presence, but her promise. From that moment on, something shifted inside me. I stopped thinking of our work as helping Mama Grace's mission and started seeing it as continuing it. Emily and I began organizing regular drives, reaching beyond our town, helping other children who had no one else. The old church became a beacon, not because of bricks and paint, but because of what it represented: resilience, compassion, and the belief that one person can change 1,000 lives. And though Mama Grace's health continued to weaken, her spirit seemed only to grow stronger. Every smile she gave the children, every blessing she whispered over them, was like a torch being passed from her hands to ours. So here I am, standing at the end of this story, yet knowing it will never truly end, because the story of Mama Grace is no longer hers alone. It belongs to every child she sheltered, to every heart she touched, to every person who hears about her and dares to believe in love again. One day, when Emily is older, she'll tell her own children about the woman in a wheelchair who asked for leftovers and gave the world more than anyone expected. And those children will tell theirs. And in that way, Mama Grace will never die. Her story will live, like a lantern carried through generations, lighting paths for people who may never even know her name. And maybe that's the greatest legacy of all.